Situation of India amongst the world's major economies. A major economy with a major industrial sector, one of the largest industrial sectors you can find when you compare across countries, and yet an exception in the sense that it has never industrialized and doesn't even appear to be heading in that direction. And the second paradox, in a sense, is that the more conspicuous this absence has become over time, the less it appears to be recognized or acknowledged in policy making. In a sense, it is an indictment of policy over a long period of time, but at the same time, policy making simply often refuses to even acknowledge that there's such a reality exists. So those are the two dimensions of the paradox of Indian industrialization that I want to have. And the paradox in quotes, because it's not really that they are beyond explanation, but the question first has to be asked before you can start answering them. We'll have the next one, please. As something very important in the process of economic development, the Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Revolution acquiring the position of becoming the world's manufacturing hub, all of them at different points of time in history are, the very terms invoke something dramatic, rapid transformations happening, at the center of which is the manufacturing sector. And manufacturing and industrialization, therefore, has been seen as something that is an engine of economic growth historically, and that has remained true till date. So even today, these are relatively contemporary descriptions of it. They are referring to things which remain valid even today. What is also true is that manufacturing is also one of those activities which, in comparison to all the other activities which we list out in any classification of the economy for computing estimates of GDP, etc., is the one which is most amenable to geographical concentration. Agriculture, because it requires land, cannot be concentrated in some parts of the world in the same way. Construction and many services also geographically have to be dispersed in the way the population is dispersed. Many of them are not tradable across countries, whereas manufacturing is something that is amenable to concentration, it has a tradable characteristic. So it's also been one of the important, that kind of concentration has also been an important aspect of unevenness within the world economy, that regions which came to be the centers where these people are concentrated. So historically, the divergence between very advanced parts of the world and backward parts of the world was also related to industrialization. If there has been any shift or change in that geographical patterns of production, those geographical patterns of production, they have also been related to processes of industrialization. So in that sense, industrialization becomes an important question for an economy like India. The importance of industrialization is even when industrialization is also accused of being one of the major causes of problems of the environment, climate, etc. Even then, when people are talking about sustainable development, or industrialization, as you can see, is something that is considered to be still an important part of the process of development, sustainable development, and of addressing the problems of inequality that exist within and among countries. So now if you look at the Indian position, if you look at, say, India's context today, okay, so we often self-congratulatory terms describe ourselves as one of the world's fastest growing economies today. But in terms of the level of even, say, national income, forget about it, the question of its distribution, there's still a long distance that India has to go. India made the transition from low income to lower middle income status in the World Bank classification in 2007. and we are still only halfway to the upper middle income stage, as you can see here, and there's still a very, very long way to go before we go to high income status. The kind of growth one would require to acquire high income status by 2047 would be quite phenomenal, actually. So there's still a long distance to go. So amongst the world's countries, India still ranks amongst the countries which are relatively much lower average income levels. But it's a country with a large industrial sector. Okay, so if you look at these indicators of the size of India's industrial economy, they would appear quite impressive, because there would be very few countries in the world which would have shares in the world total which are higher than these. Okay, so we are the world's second largest producer of cement, now the second largest producer of steel, we are the fourth largest refiner of oil in the world, fourth or fifth position with regard to electricity production and consumption. You look at things like automobiles, also fourth or fifth status in terms of the size of the industrial sector. So we have large sectors in different manufacturing activities when you compare with different countries. But two things to be noted here is that when you look at manufacturing value added as opposed to simply physical production figures of selected, the share of India in world manufacturing is still less than 3%. Less than 3%. As far as the trade in manufactured products is concerned, under 2%. And of course, we don't not only we don't export very much, and we tend to import a little bit more than that in terms of our trade. So it's not a major player in the world in terms of providing or selling to the world market, or even buying from the world market of manufacturers. And the other thing to note is, of course, that the question of the size of the Indian population relative to this thing. So amongst the world's countries, of course, there's only one other country which is a comparable population size. Number 3 is way, way below. So if you look at the size of India's industrial sector relative to the size of its population, so we are second highest producer of cement or of steel, but who's the first? And how far above India is the first? When you look at that figure, it looks very different, the position. So if you look at India's location in terms of its industrialization position, it actually reflects its its relatively low national income status.